This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to this edition of Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm your host, Roby Brock. Governor Sarah Sanders delivered her State of the State speech to the 95th General Assembly on Tuesday at the Arkansas State Capitol. We'll run through some of the details of what she put forth in terms of proposals. We also will analyze the Democrats' response to that. And Senator Justin Boyd, Republican of Fort Smith, joins us today to talk about his reaction to the governor's speech and a few things happening on the healthcare front. This is Talk Business and Politics Daily. Stay with us.
Talk Business and Politics Daily is sponsored in part by Impact Management Group and
Power. It's right there, waiting, ready to go when you are. Connect this, click that, unconnect and go every day. Delivered by your electric cooperative. Each unique, always united, and completely local. Born from a mission to provide dependable, sustainable, and affordable power to every corner of Arkansas. And delivering on that promise for a brighter Arkansas every day. It's the local hometown cooperative way. Better connected. Together. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas.
Well, Governor Sarah Sanders spoke to the Arkansas legislature on this second day of the 95th Arkansas General Assembly. Here are a few highlights of what she discussed. Banning cell phones in public schools, changes to higher education funding, firing professors for being, quote, woke, eliminating the grocery tax, free school breakfasts paid for by medical marijuana tax funds, and a 20% pay increase for state troopers. Democrats responded to the Republican governor's speech. They control 19 of 100 seats in the Arkansas House and 6 of the 35 seats in the Senate. Some of their pushback included opposing voucher programs, opposing the Franklin County Prison, questions about that professor tenure proposal. Senator Fred Love and Representative Andrew Collins, who lead Democrats in their respective chambers, said there was some support for the governor's priorities. They include supporting maternal health measures, supporting the grocery tax repeal, and supporting hunger relief proposals. And when we come back, State Senator Justin Boyd, Republican of Fort Smith, offers his thoughts on the governor's speech, what he liked, what he maybe wanted to hear further about, and we'll get an idea of some things that he's working on in this legislative session. Here's a hint for you. It centers around healthcare. I'm Roby Brock. We're back right after this.
Talk Business and Politics Daily is sponsored in part by Capital Advisors Group and
in the Navy, I train recruits. At Walmart, I recruit veterans. So many veterans have built their careers here.
Served in the Army for 11 years. I was promoted 4 times. Been with Walmart 9 years. I've been promoted 5 times.
I started as an hourly associate, and now I run the store.
430,000 veterans hired in the last decade. That's more than serving in the U.S. Navy today. There's no better place for veterans to work.
Joining me now, Senator Justin Boyd, Republican of Fort Smith. Always good to visit with him. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Hi, Roby. Thanks for having me. I look forward to our visit here.
Let's start first with your reaction to the governor's State of the State speech, which was given earlier this morning. It's a pretty lengthy speech. There was quite a bit of meat and potatoes in there, actually.
It was a great speech from my perspective. I think that she reflected a lot of the things that Arkansans feel and believe. And I think she did a great job of making it personal. Every time she went to a policy discussion or a challenge, she was able to bring in, whether it was her dad or kids or the sheriff, which she provided the Arkansas Medal of Freedom. She did a great job of relaying a story that supported why we needed to do that. And I think that's a really important communication tool to help everybody understand. I mean, we can sit here and we can speak a lingo, but it's really those stories that help Arkansans and Americans understand why we're doing the things we're doing and why they're necessary.
Let's hit a couple of the highlights. She is obviously kind of threw down the gauntlet. There will be some changes in higher education, particularly to the funding formula. That's going to be a proposal that comes from her. I don't think there's going to be a lot of legislative pushback for that. She talked too about using medical marijuana tax funds to expand the free breakfast program for students. Another area that I think there'll be some popularity for, maybe not among medical marijuana taxpayers, but for sure among the legislature. And then I thought too, another one was banning the cell phones from schools. Do you see any resistance to any of those kind of major education initiatives that she laid out?
So I think that on a higher level, I don't anticipate a lot of resistance, especially on the cell phone banning. I noticed that regardless of the party, people were standing and acknowledging that. I think when you go back to the higher ed formula, I think that we all know we need to do something, but again, all politics are local. So in my case, I'm going to go, well, how's this affecting University of Arkansas Fort Smith, right? And I'm going to be taking some of my cues as to whether this is good or bad for my part of the state and how that impacts that. Now, at the end of the day, we got to look statewide and not just look at our legislative districts, but I also represent UA Fort Smith. And then, I'll disclose to you, I have a child who attends Arkansas Tech, right? So I'm going to be naturally more intent on looking there. But I do agree that it is something that's going to happen. As far as funding breakfast, I think that's a very popular idea in the state of Arkansas. She called it out that Arkansans are generous, and that's one of our greatest assets. And I think that's just a reflection of how we're going to be neighborly and take care of one another.
I thought another issue that she brought up was eliminating the grocery tax, which really all that's left on the grocery tax, I believe, is 1/8 of a cent that goes to primarily Game and Fish Commission, Parks and Tourism, maybe Keep Arkansas Beautiful. And it's part of a constitutional amendment that was passed back during when her father was governor. I guess she didn't say any specifics on it other than she wanted to eliminate the grocery tax. That to me suggests that she's going to have to get you guys to propose a constitutional amendment to lose that 1/8 cent. Tell me whether or not you agree with that's the method for doing it. Number two, do you think there'll be legislative support to replace that revenue for those state agencies, which tend to have a pretty high priority for the governor?
Well, I think those are all valid points. And I think it comes back to the devil is always in the details. How are we going to do it? What's the mechanism? There are ways sometimes that we can do things constitutionally that might not be readily apparent. I could point back to some election things that we've done that maybe the Constitution said that, but we found a way to do it, or we've been able to change. It was a section of the Constitution that we could change with a 2/3 vote. So I don't know. I've not seen any specific legislation. I do agree with you. I'm a hunter and I like to fish, and I want to make sure that we adequately fund our conservation issues, and that's part of what that tax is for. So I'm going to be looking and going, how are we going to replace that revenue? Not just we're going to, get rid of the source. And, so I think the devil's going to be in the details, but I do think that it is a very popular idea to eliminate any remaining taxes on groceries.
Yeah.
I want to be clear by popular, and I would like to support it. But again, we've got to make sure that it is a cohesive plan that addresses everybody's concerns, and we can reach consensus.
Yeah, good point. Good point. A couple of things that I did not hear in her speech, but I know are going to be major issues for you guys. Maternal health, some changes in policy there. She didn't really touch on anything in that, if I heard the speech correctly. Healthcare and hospital kind of stakeholder funding, another big issue that you guys have been grappling with and will have to. Did it surprise you that she did not throw out any ideas on that? And do you expect those to still be pretty high legislative priorities?
I expect to see legislation on all those fronts. I think the challenge is maybe we have less consensus on exactly how we're going to go forward on addressing those issues. Maybe somebody has a plan somewhere, but I've yet to see the exact plan where you're going to have enough agreement to move that specific plan forward. So I think it's less of, hey, this isn't an important issue. It's more about how exactly are we going to do it. But there was a point where she did refer to the maternal health. I can't remember exactly where it was, but she did acknowledge it at one point in time. But I don't recall a specific plan there.
Well, that's good insight there that there's probably just still some consensus to build on this because there have been a variety of different pieces of legislation already introduced. A lot of people have different thoughts. We'll keep our eye on that. Another one that's a big one to you, you're a pharmacist. You have been following this PBM issue. We've had a bunch of hearings just a little over a month ago to try to work out some solutions for the state's pharmacies. I know there's a press conference to kind of talk about PBMs on Thursday of this week. I have to suspect that you are going to be, you have some thoughts that are pretty strong about how we should address this pharmacy funding crisis that we're in right now in a little bit different level. Tell me what's on your agenda.
So there is a press conference. It's not my press conference with the Arkansas Pharmacists Association. I want to be clear, it's theirs, and so I want to be respectful of what they plan to do and let them speak. I do plan to be in attendance. I think that what I'd like to clarify is there's been a lot of emphasis on pharmacy, but this is an issue that affects every single healthcare profession I can think of. Inflation has happened. The price of labor has increased. The price of goods has increased. Every aspect has gone up. And while I suspect every different type of healthcare provider has worked to create efficiencies, at some point in time, just like the average household is experiencing inflation, so is a healthcare entity, right? And so I think that we've got to look at that and look beyond, hey, here's just this one provider type. I don't think that pharmacists are experiencing any more of an issue than podiatrists or dentists. I've heard from some pediatric dentists. So what I will say is I've been having discussions with Representative Lee Johnson, and we have our own version of a bill that will be coming forward that is similar to but separate from what the Pharmacists Association is doing. So, they have their issue, and I've heard actually from another couple providers that they're going to bring something similar. And there's been some, discussions behind the scenes. And so I think that Representative Johnson and I are looking at the bigger picture and going, how do we address this for all providers, not just one?
Give me just a little bit of insight. I don't want you to, obviously this is still a work in progress, but give me like one piece of the pie that you could talk about publicly right now that you feel like would be result in cost savings or inflation reduction for someone in that healthcare system that you're talking about.
I think that when you look across the space of healthcare, we have a lot of discrepancy in payments. If you want me to drill down on pharmacy specifically, I can drill down to employee benefits division. But what I'd rather do is, and again, I don't have the example right in front of me, but the Federal Trade Commission showed a case where there was a cancer drug that if you went to their entity, it was over $19,000. I want to say the Federal Trade Commission report was $19,200 for that product there. And if you went to a local brick and mortar pharmacy, it was under $100. It was like $97. And in that specific example, the $97 was probably an adequate and fair payment by any normal person's perspective. But why in the world would it be $19,200 somewhere else? And I'm not making that up. The Federal Trade Commission, Roby, found that example. And they also had another one that was not quite as egregious, but it was out there and notable. So, when we talk about maybe there's a nickel or a dime or a dollar, possibly, there's a level where you can argue some level of efficiency, but not in thousands of dollars. And I would say not even in dollars. If we eliminate competition and we drive people to places where the dollars are more, that's going to drive up costs, not drive them down. And so everywhere in the health insurance market, we've had decades for costs to come down. And we've blamed it all on innovation. We've blamed it all on greedy providers. There have been a lot of arguments that seem to make sense. But the reality is healthcare costs are going up faster than inflation. And there are payment discrepancies which absolutely do not make sense. And if you don't believe me, listen to Congress. Congress is talking about this. The Wall Street Journal is reporting on this, it seems like every other week. So I think it's time that we have a real conversation about what really makes sense and what is good policy in Arkansas. And if we adopt good policy that has the right impact, then I think that you're going to see 49 other states follow suit.
And you and Representative Johnson think you have a piece of legislation and process that can address those discrepancies that you're talking about?
So as a pharmacist in one of my other jobs, right, we go back to chemistry and we talk about the rate limiting steps. So you can't really speed up an enzymatic reaction until you figure out what the slowest step is, right? So because otherwise you're just nibbling around the edges and you can't make it faster. And so I think that's what we're working on is identifying that rate limiting step and figuring out what it is where the biggest discrepancies are happening and what is a potential solution for that. And so when we're ready, we're going to file a bill. We're going to have a discussion, and I would be surprised if you and I don't follow up and have continue this conversation after that.
Yeah, I'd very much like that. Just one promise from you is all I'm going to try to extract as we end this interview, that you'll give me a little bit of a heads up before you file the bill so that I can be prepared to be watching for it. Will you promise me that?
I will promise you that.
Thank you very much. Senator Justin Boyd, Republican of Fort Smith. Look forward to the continued conversation. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you having me. Have a great rest of your day.
Well, that is all for this edition of Talk Business and Politics Daily. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.